Hey everybody, welcome to the Path of Exile build guide for the one-man army dominating blow Guardian build. Today we're going to be going over basically everything about the build in preparation for 3.10, which is going to be announced sometime in this next week, and then we'll kind of take a look at some different options that we have for leveling and working on in the next league. But if you've ever felt like you wanted to outnumber bosses as much as you possibly can, in a viable way for that matter, and you felt like traditional minion builds are a little too wimpy and stand in the backy for you, this is the perfect build. We are name lock melee, so if that's not your wheelhouse, you might want to take a step away right there. But if you are willing to take the risk of diving into the melee with your minions, I feel like this build is a very viable one and a very good option for you. It's a very hipster build as well. We are a Guardian that doesn't actually run with a party. We are playing Dominating Blow, and we are playing Herald of Purity, and occasionally running with some other Holy Relic shenanigans. Currently, we're hitting about 5 million DPS in the endgame against single target bosses. Possibly more, possibly less, depending on what we have up at the time. And we've got about 7.6k life. We're at level 95, so we've got some good numbers. The first thing we're going to start off with here is we're going to do the usual, a little bit of a Phoenix map. This one's not crazy. We're cursed with vulnerability, but aside from that, there's nothing too hectic going on. So first thing we want to do is showcase the build, show how the playstyle works. The start of the maps are always a little bit rougher. You're going to be starting off a little slower. You can see we only have 5 minions right now. Sad to be us. We could be running zombies to have a little more. And you can see our first pack clear is very slow. But once we have our Dominating Blow Sentinels up and our Herald of Purity Sentinels up, everything goes pretty fast. I mean, there was a rare in there, I suppose. We're not going to worry about full clearing. We just want to get to the boss and show off our single target DPS. Currently, we have an Allies Cannot Die aura. Oh, and now it's gone. As we raise a series of rare minions after rare minions. But the build excels in fights that are not separate in separate zones from the rest of the minions or from the rest of the monsters in the map. In cases of the Conquerors, the Metamorphs, this build is absolutely fantastic. It's a little more rough for Cyrus, and as I'm currently getting completely lost in this map, talking and playing at the same time, we find that against Cyrus, this build is a little tougher. We didn't think we'd be able to do it, but we did manage to take out the Awakener 8. Whoa, Martyrs. Hardcore viable. We did manage to take out Awakener 8 on this build, so it is possible. It's a little rough, but it is totally possible to do Deathless. The only reason we died is because I'm bad, not because the build is bad. As you can see, we've zoomed our way along. We really want to get this aura. We did get it. Fantastic. And we forgot to Flesh Offering, but that's okay. So the main thing you're going to want to do in a fight like the Phoenix is convocate your minions and get them out of the way as frequently as you can. But aside from that, you just want to kind of rumble the guy. Again, convocate away, and then just completely mosh pit on him. You can see, pretty good. With the increased boss life of these late game bosses, we're still managing to shred through pretty comfortably. So we're back in our hideout, and what we're going to want to do is take a look at some of the pros and cons of the build and how we itemize to help with those. Some of the pros are that we do absolutely huge damage. I don't know if I've ever done 5 million damage before. Once or twice maybe, but not on a consistent build, especially not one with 7.6k life. Our clear is good. Most normal maps are super fun to run, especially because you get to kind of hit the jackpot and get some of those minions that have some of those great auras like we had happen there. And then we have fantastic single target, and it's a very flexible build that allows for a lot of player expression and discovery. I haven't even discovered all the things that I want to discover about the build and all the different viable options that I want to tinker with. Some of our cons are that we do have a high ramp up time, especially against bosses that don't summon any form of minion. Our minions die, and that is very bad for us. You saw against the Phoenix, we were doing okay. None of our smaller minions were dying, and we do have our Holy Relic, our 3 Spectres, and our Carrion Golem all still alive, which is very good for us. We are name lock melee, so against the Phoenix there, we do kind of have to stand in range. It does mean that some enemies use less dangerous attacks, and we do have ways to mitigate that as well. And then finally, one of our final cons is that we have a limited number of sockets to make use with, and this is a lot of where the player expression comes in. We're going to take a look at some of the items here and how they help with that. First off, we are name luck melee. So all of our items are, except for 3, are just good rares. Our resists are overcapped, everything is elemental weakness capped, and our chaos is even overcapped, which you don't need, but it's fun to have all of our numbers in the 110 range. We do only have 5.1k armor, which is a little low, especially if you wanted to play this in hardcore, but there are options for hardcore that we'll cover later. We have blind, which we're running to help with our defenses a little bit, and our move speed is very low, but we compensate for that with a few options. Most of the time, we're going to be whirling bladesing around, and because we're doing that, in part, we want to be using the Scourge Claws. Our attack speed is one of the most important options to help us decrease our ramp-up time, and so the Scourge Claws are very good for that. In this case, the Scourge Claws also give us extra damage, and give our minions a shit ton of extra damage as well. Minions deal 70% increased damage if you've hit recently, is very valuable for our build. 2 Scourge Claws effectively equates to 140% increased damage for our minions and us, and that stacks additively with other sources from the tree. Additionally, the minions have increased attack speed is very good for our minion damage, as well as increasing our attack speed. And then the 13% increased attack speed from Scourge is very good as well. These are by no means mandatory for the build. You can run the build completely on rares and be completely comfortable. The Scourge is one of the biggest damage upgrades you can get. Unfortunately, these used to be super budget. Unfortunately, the Shaper is no longer part of the core game, and so the Scourge Claws have become a little more expensive to find early in the league. These I purchased in the first week for about 20 chaos each, so nothing too out of the ordinary, but certainly an investment. And then the only other unique that we're running right now is the Hungry Loop, which is a ring that, if you don't know how it works, you socket gems in it, and as you level them up to 20, they get consumed if they are support gems, and will support any gem that you, or any active skill gem that you socket into it. You do not need to level the gem up all the time inside this. All you need to do is get it up to 100% XP at level 19, take it out from whatever you were running it in, plop it into the Hungry Loop, and then click the little plus button to put it inside. Currently, we are using the Hungry Loop to support our Herald of Purity, as it is a less important contributor to our damage, and it helps us conserve a little less mana by not running Herald of Purity on a 6-link. You don't need to run any 6 links, of course, but we are running Brutality, Feeding Frenzy, Maim, and Ruthless in here. There's a little bit of flexibility in that. This is one of the skill gem setups that I was the most sure about, given that it's something that we couldn't change. So you can tinker with this a little bit, but it's a pain to do so. This is one where you definitely want to path of building or look at other guides and see what you kind of want to do for your skills beforehand. But those are the only uniques we're running. Everything else is life and resistances. Life and resistances, life and resistances. Our belt could use an upgrade, but aside from that, and our gloves could actually probably use an upgrade, we've made a decent effort to get chaos resistance, obviously. And another thing that can help a little is reducing the mana cost of our Dominating Blow. Currently our mana cost is 23 on a 6-link, which means that if we're not hitting any enemies, we are just barely not sustaining. As long as we're hitting any enemies, we're leeching just enough mana to ignore that. Actually, just thinking about this now, our enchantments are real awful, but that's fine. What else you're looking for in your items is Death Attunement on your amulet. This is optional. We are currently hitting our 5 minions for our Guardian. We'll go over that in a second as well, just because we've got a 3rd Spectre. And running a 3rd Spectre allows you a little bit more flexibility, again, to run either a Host Chieftain, Carnage Chieftain. So for our gem setup, we do have one 6-link, and 6 links are entirely optional in this build. Our 6-link is for our Dominating Blow. It is the highest contributor to our damage. With our 6-link Dominating Blow, it's approaching approximately 3.6 million single target DPS for the 9 Sentinels. The unfortunate thing is that against bosses like the Awakener, we don't have our magic and rare Sentinels, which would give us even more damage, but against any Conquerors, we do get those up. Our 6-link is Brutality. Brutality is very important for this build. It's just a massive damage multiplier. We've got a multi-strike, which increases our attack speed drastically, and multi-strike is not the best support for damage, but the fact that it increases our attack speed is one of the main reasons that we're running this. We wish that we could change this up, but we really can't. Running melee physical damage and minion damage just as decent damage multipliers, and then we're running Impale as a 6 link. If you were to down it to a 5 link, you can swap out any one of these 3. Impale ends up being a slightly higher damage option at the cost of also needing to run Dread Banner over War Banner, but that's fine. The other gems that we're running are Whirling Blades with faster attacks, just to help us get around the map as quickly as possible. That's that's one of the most important parts of the build. Running a Convocation to allow us to summon our minions back to us. This is important to use, first off, to give them regeneration. Second off, it triggers a few cast a spell options that we have. And third off, well, no, that's it. It allows us to save our minions. Well, no, it actually allows us to mosh pit enemies as well. Sometimes your minions start to spread out and start fighting smaller enemies. If you are trying to DPS down a boss, you want to get into the boss, you want to convocate all your 20, 30 minions onto them, and then you're happy. We are running Ray Spectres, linked with Blood Magic and Meat Shield. That is very important. We don't want them to die, so giving them Meat Shield is good. It also gives them the ability to taunt, which provides us with a little more defense, as well as the rest of our minions with a little more defense. Taunted enemies deal less damage to enemies that didn't taunt them, so that provides us with a little more benefit there, as well for our Carrion Golem, giving that the ability to taunt. And then Blood Magic is very important for our Spectres. We are running Carnage Chieftains and Host Chieftains. Ooh, that guy's hidden by me, which you can get from Act 2, or Part 2, Act 7. Ashen Fields, you can find both of them here with either Desecrate or running around and killing them. The Carnage Chieftains are the most important. They give us Frenzy Charges, which are a massive damage multiplier for minions. Minion Frenzy Charges deal significantly, or give significantly greater benefits than for players. The Host Chieftain is optional. If you have Death Attunement, there are other options that you can run. The Ruins Hellion, the Undying Evangelist that gives Proximity Shield are more defensive options, perhaps if you're playing hardcore. But the Frenzy Spectre is the most important, just to get 2 of those up. But you get those from the gem anyways, so there's no worries, no rush to get to Death Attunement. We are running them linked with Blood Magic. If you do not run these Spectres with Blood Magic, they do have a mana pool, and they will only grant Frenzy Charges once every 12 seconds or so. I don't know what the exact sort of regeneration time is, but that's not obviously enough to sustain on your minions, who only have 10-second lasting power charges, frenzy charges. So linking them with Blood Magic, they will use their frenzying charge significantly more frequently, and your minions will almost always have 3 charges. Our Herald of Purity, we have linked to Brutality, Feeding Frenzy, Maim, and Ruthless. We have them linked to Brutality just because it's the biggest damage multiplier. Ruthless for a similar reason. You could use melee physical. But the Feeding Frenzy and the Maim are interesting choices. We're running them with Feeding Frenzy and Maim because they are our second most populous minion. So we know for a fact that we will have Feeding Frenzy all the time when we map, and that enemies will always be maimed. If we link Feeding Frenzy to our Spectres, we will unlikely have our Feeding Frenzy buff active, buffing our Dominating Blow minions while we fight bosses, for example. We do have a Summon Holy Relic, which is very important for the start of maps, allowing us to finish off that first pack or 2, and then we get to snowball in with our Dominating Blow minions. Our Sentinel of Purity by itself is doing about 500,000 damage, which is enough to clear the white pack, and then you can get into the boss fight and the rest of the map. We are linking that to Brutality and minion damage, just to give them a little more damage. For fun, you can link them with Summon Phantasm, just because you get more minions, and it's more fun that way. And then we do have in here, because we are a little short on sockets, and again, we can shift these around and make them better, we are running a Flesh Offering as well. We are running a Val Haste. The only issue is that Val Haste is hard to keep up against bosses, and it is hard to keep up a Flesh Offering against bosses when we don't have a Desecrate. So against bosses, swap out the Val Haste for a Desecrate, and then you're happy and good to go. Finally, we are running a Steel Skin, Dread Banner, Flesh and Stone, and Convocation setup. The Steel Skin is self-cast, first off to save on our gem sockets, and second off so that we have a little more control over it. Our Steel Skin does last just over 2 seconds, so we have a little bit of uptime on that we get to use to prevent ourselves from taking any more damage. We would like to run perhaps a Val Molten Shell, and that's an option that you could look into for higher mitigation against bosses or metamorphs when you need it, but who knows, that might get nerfed next league anyways. We're running Dread Banner because Dread Banner plus Impale is about a 51% damage multiplier, not including the 15% more that Impale grants. And it's significant. We aren't actually placing our banner ever. And then we are running a Flesh and Stone. Flesh and Stone gives us a couple options. We can run it either to blind nearby enemies and take less damage from enemies, or we can switch when we're feeling confident or want to DPS down a boss that we're confident we can dodge. We can switch it to Blood Stance and get a little bit 10% more extra damage. The only issue is that enemies are already intimidated, so the Flesh and Stone take % increased physical damage is mitigated a little bit by that. It's not quite 16% more damage, but it's about 12-15% more, I believe. There are a lot more options for your gem links. You could think about running Val Summon Skeletons. I love it for, you pop the clown car and all of a sudden you have a shit ton of extra minions. You could save on running the Vigilant Strike. Oh, I forgot to mention the Vigilant Strike. We're running Vigilant Strike Curse on Hit Vulnerability. Our Vigilant Strike is supported by a Vigil Jewel, which provides nearby allies Fortify for 32 seconds, 34? 32 seconds with all our increased duration, which provides our minions with a little bit more defense, because we definitely don't want our minions to die. Especially because our minions are melee, and Convocation is our only defense and way of making our minions a little smarter. We are running it linked with Curse on Hit Vulnerability, because we only really need vulnerability against bosses, and against bosses and metamorphs, we want to be tapping Vigilant Strike anyways on them to make sure that we maintain uptime on our Fortify. Our skill tree is very simple. The main thing that we're going to be getting is any source of increased minion damage and life from the tree. That's, as you can see, that's basically everything that we're getting on the tree is minion damage and life. A few important nodes are Resolute Technique. If we don't have Resolute Technique, our accuracy is absolutely awful, and our accuracy matters significantly because we need to hit enemies to summon our Dominating Blow sentries, or sentinels, and so forth. Another important node is Spiritual Command. Increases and reductions to minion attack speed also affect us. This node alone is giving us about 33% more attack speed, which decreases the amount of ramp-up time for bosses. Enduring Bond and this series of nodes are actually very handy as well. Increasing our minion skill duration is incredibly handy, keeping our minions alive for longer in bosses when we would otherwise lose some of our rare minions against metamorphs or against conquerors. This gives us a little bit more of an edge. You would think that Spiritual Aid was a very important node for us, and it's a good node, but it is not by any means most important. The increases and reductions to minion damage also affect you is only relevant if you're not running the Scourge Claws and you're running a budget version of the build that's running on, say, for example, Brightbeak. But as we have two Scourge Claws, we already have increases and reductions to minion damage also affect you. We already have that twice. They don't stack. We don't get triple damage from minion damage increases. So they just, here, Righteous Army, Redemption, and Spiritual Aid nodes are just good nodes for minion damage and survivability. Two nodes that you might not think are very important for this build are Sacrifice and Indomitable Army, as well as this little minion life and elemental resistances node here. Minions by default have 40% resistances, which means that they are going to be taking a little more than double the damage they could be from bosses like the Awakener when he hits them with fire damage, or bosses like the Shaper when he hits them with cold damage. With these three nodes, we get 35% extra minion elemental resistances. Their chaos resistances are still low, unfortunately. We don't really have the option to path all the way over to here. In a Necromancer version of the build we could, but regardless, our minions do die to chaos damage, and the Hunter fight is a real son of a bitch. But this gives us enough resistances and a little bit of extra minion life to allow them to survive in these fights. When we combine that with our Vigilant Strike, giving them AoE Fortify, and our Raise Spectres taunting enemies, this actually provides our minions with a lot of defense, and since we've made those changes, our minions have been dying significantly less. Also important is the level of the gem to give minions more base life, which then gets scaled as well. Aside from that, Scion Life Wheel, hit the Marauder life nodes here. These nodes here are not... I waffle back and forth on these nodes. You could... Actually, in fact, I really should drop these nodes. The only important nodes in the attack speed tree here, or in the in the one-handed node sort of tree here, are the attack speed nodes. Our damage on our Dominating Blow is 36,000, which is maybe 200,000, 150,000 with Impale and Intimidate and all of our other frenzy charges and stuff up. So our personal damage is really not that much compared to the 5 million our summons are doing. So the main thing we want is the increased attack speed, the increased attack speed, and the increased attack speed here. You could drop these two nodes entirely and grab this strength node and this intelligence node. It kind of comes out in the wash regardless. The only other major thing on the tree is our fluid motion node. Our intelligence is good. We have enough intelligence from the tree that we can run all of our gems. We don't have to worry too much about that. Our dexterity, however, is significantly low. Our strength is totally fine, especially because we're trying to find strength on gear for extra life, etc. So we are happy to give up 60 points of strength, or 40 points of strength, sorry, from devotion, strength, and strength nodes here to transform those into dexterity by socketing a fluid motion into our tree. That gives us a total of 64 extra dexterity, which is actually exactly half of our dexterity right now, which allows us to run things like our Impale, our Multi-Strike, our Whirling Blades, our faster attacks, and our Val Haste. Val Haste is the only dexterity gem that we currently cannot level up that requires a little bit more dexterity than we have at the moment. Our Ascendancy for the build is Guardian, and that's not as mandatory as you might think. A better option in terms of damage and to some extent general utility and usability would be Necromancer. What Guardian gives us is basically two nodes. It gives us Radiant Crusade, which gives, while we have 5 nearby allies, everybody has Onslaught, including us, and everybody deals 10% more damage. This is very nice. You can see our normal movement speed. We've only got 10% movement speed from our boots. So with that, we're actually moving around pretty fast with Onslaught, and then we get to Whirling Blades around a little faster. As well, it of course increases our minion damage. The really big kick in the nuts here is that Radiant Crusade gives plus 20% to all elemental resistances. For you and only you. And if this gave it to all nearby allies, we would be able to drop these nodes, all of these nodes entirely. We'd probably go up to Grave Intentions, but realistically probably just find more life nodes on the tree and get some more armor as well and increase our defense that way. These nodes are really not that valuable in terms of damage. The only reason we're pathing down here is because of the elemental resistances. The physical damage reduction is nice, but it's basically only to get the elemental resistances, and then we take these nodes because we're here anyways. Unfortunately, this elemental resistance node only applies to us. Secondly, we're taking Unwavering Crusade, which is just a bunch of damage, and Intimidate and Unnerve, which is also just more damage. So these two nodes are very, very valuable and provide us with a significant amount of damage. However, our last two nodes are pretty awful. Radiant Faith, since we are not scaling Energy Shield, does almost nothing for us, and Unwavering Faith, because we're not running very many auras, also does almost nothing for us. So we're running Time of Need. It gives you a little bit more quality of life when running maps. It gives you 25% reduced effect of curses, which is handy. If you wanted, you could take Sanctum of Thought for another 20% reduced effect of curses, and then you can run your maps basically with any curses without having to worry. It lets you cap your resistances a little less as well. And then every 5 seconds, you regenerate 30% of your life over 1 second. That saved us a couple of times. It's fine. If you were playing in hardcore, I would suggest playing the Guardian build, and rather than taking Harmony of Purpose, which we've taken because I am running with a party of friends every now and again, and this is a nice support item for them, we would take Bastion of Hope if we were playing in hardcore, giving us extra block chance, giving us stun immunity, and giving allies extra block chance. A little extra mitigations for our minions is fine. If you were running in hardcore, I would suggest as well, you could run a shield. Because you are running in hardcore, perhaps the ramp up time is a little less important for you, but I definitely would suggest running one Scourge. One thing I did forget to mention is the Summon Spectral Wolf is nothing for us. We're actually never really killing enemies, so the Summon Spectral Wolf doesn't actually trigger. Every now and again you've got one hanging out. It's kind of fun. Good dog. Other options, if you're running in hardcore, is you could run a meat shield on more of your minions and provide them, make sure that they're close to you a little more and that they're running taunt. I'm not a big fan of that. And then finally, you could maybe run an Ancestral Guardian holding a Kingmaker. The Kingmaker is it's very expensive, first of all, for Trade League, and almost impossible to get in solo self-found. But it provides all nearby allies with Fortify, and if you summon an Ancestral Guardian, which holds items for you, it provides you with Fortify and all your nearby minions with Fortify. It also gives your minions some extra crit strike multiplier, which is good since we're running a a host chieftain to provide power charges, and it provides a few other benefits for your minions, but it is very expensive, and if you aren't comfortable with running an Ancestral Guardian, which I am not, it is a route that you might want to avoid. We've run an Ancestral Guardian a couple times in this build, and it does a good job of surviving, but every now and again, if you turn off your brain, you eat a bad metamorph, your Ancestral Guardian can die, and if you've got a Kingmaker on it, that's a huge cost. But if you're playing in hardcore and you're trying to focus and pay a little more attention at all times, I think that's a decent option. Leveling this build is incredibly easy, and to some extent incredibly fun. Your first act, unfortunately, you don't really get into the meat and potatoes of the build, but you can run a few minions at the start if you wish. If you have access to good leveling melee weapons, it's probably best to just level using Ground Slam and Molten Strike, but especially at the start of the league, or if you want, like I do, to sort of run through the build, or run through leveling as the build, you can totally do that as well. If you were to do that, my suggestion would be to run Raised Zombie, and then as soon as you have access to it, get Summon Raging Spirits. You can link the Summon Raging Spirits with Infernal Legion to give them some decent AoE, or Melee Splash. Try them both out and see what you like. Minion damage, you can socket into both of them. You can run Summon Phantasm, honestly, on your zombies or on your Summon Raging Spirits. And by the middle point of Act 1, say the Brutus fight, you can have up to 20 minions if you're lucky. It's a little tough, but you can have quite a few minions by the end of Act 1. Once you've killed Brutus, you can try out Summon Skeletons as another option, as a replacement for Summon Raging Spirits. That's basically up to personal choice. And aside from that, you pick yourself up a movement skill, and you start heading into the Mervale fight, into Act 2. Pretty comfortable. In terms of leveling gear, the only thing at any point that you need is, but you don't even need it, is a Bright Beak. A Bright Beak can take you from the beginning of the game to the end of the game entirely. I think I ran a Bright Beak in this build until T11, T12 maps, and it was slow, but it was fine. You move around a lot faster, and a Bright Beak is a perfectly viable way to run through the game. Once you hit Act 2, you want to beeline towards the Chamber of Sins. Once you've hit the Chamber of Sins, you can complete the quest and save Helena. You can talk to Groost, and Groost will give you a Herald of Purity. I'm having a hard time finding the item that my build relies on. Once you've got your Herald of Purity, you can then make a choice. If you are running Summon Skeletons and Summon Raging Spirits, your Herald of Purity is never going to trigger, because Herald of Purity only triggers when you hit or kill an enemy. This is the point where it's kind of nice to pick up a couple good rare leveling one-handers or unique leveling one-handers, and you can switch to some sort of melee skill and use your zombies and your Herald of Purity minions rather than using your Summon Raging Spirits. You can level using white items. Herald of Purity gives you a decent amount of added physical damage, and Dominating Blow gives you a little bit of... not Dominating Blow, sorry. Whatever melee skill that you're using will give you a little bit of added melee physical damage as well. So you can level just fine using a couple fast attacking one-handers, maces, leap slam, zoom around the map. At this point, you do have access to melee physical damage, which you can link with your Raised Zombie. You can link with your Herald of Purity. You also have the option for damage on full life or Bloodlust. Bloodlust is a huge damage multiplier that you can use even in the final version of the build, but we have vulnerability up very rarely, so we ended up going up with Impale. Unfortunately, a lot of the others skill gems you can't use. Deathmark is okay. I would avoid using Deathmark, honestly. Just find red socket items, get some armor, get some life, throw in melee physical damage, melee splash, faster attacks, minion damage from Act 1. And then you're good until you hit Act 3. None of the fights are especially difficult. As you start fighting metamorphs that get tougher and tougher, what you want to do is you want to get all your minions up and activate any auras and so forth, and then run away.
Need something?
But once you hit Act 3 and kill Gravicious, you can pick up Dominating Blow, and at this point the build really comes online. You can drop your Summon Raging Spirits, you can drop your in your summon skeletons if you're running those still, and you can switch entirely into Dominating Blow, Summon Holy Relic, Raise Zombie, and Raise Spectre. If you want, you can still use Summon Phantasm, you can have a Val Summon Skeletons, but primarily you want to use Raise Spectre and Dominating Blow and Sentinel of Purity as sort of your main damage sources. Once you've hit that point, leveling is easy. You've got 1 to 2 Spectres at all times. You've got, depending on where you are at the tree, probably 6 or 7 zombies, which brings you up to 9 minions. You'll oftentimes have a good 5 to 10 Sentinels of Dominance, which brings you up to, say, 19. Maybe you've got some Sentinels of Purity up, which brings you up to 23 minions. Maybe you've got some Summon Phantasms up, which brings you up to, say, 30 minions. And at this point, the amount of base damage the minions do is absolutely insane because you've just got so many of them. So once you've hit this point in the game, you can level with whatever you want through acts. I choose Brightbeak because it just allows you to leap slam faster and it allows you to ramp up faster for enemies. But again, I leveled up using Brightbeak and nothing else from Act 3 to Act 10 into maps. The only thing you have to change is your armor, at which point you're just looking for more links, more health, etc. Once you hit Act 4, you grab Brutality and Multi-Strike. Multi-Strike is very good on your Dominating Blow. Until you get Multi-Strike, I would suggest running faster attacks because you, again, want to attack as quickly as possible to get your Dominating Blow minions up and your Herald of Purity minions up. The interesting thing is that if you are having a hard time killing enemies, running a Summon Holy Relic, which you can again grab from Act 1, will help you with that, and that is something I definitely suggest as well. It'll give you a little more regen and make you a little more defensive. Where are you, Summon Holy Relic? I believe you are in Act 1. Whoop. Yes, you can pick up a Summon Holy Relic from Act 1, and that will actually help you significantly. All of these you can link with, except for the Summon Holy Relic, you can link all of these with Melee Fizz, Melee Splash, Minion Damage. I would suggest for your Summon Holy Relic, Minion Damage, Brutality when you get there. You can run Maim on it because you don't have many better links that early. Faster Casting and Spell Echo don't actually really help your minion, unfortunately. Spell Echo actually doesn't work, even though it says it does on Path of Building, so keep that in mind. It will let you cast the Summon Holy Relic twice, but it will not let you activate its abilities twice. And then at that point, you're in maps. I mean, from there, you kind of just look to get better gear, try to start hitting some of your endgame goals. For me, some of my base currency makers were Jun. Alva can be, but you do have to sell rooms and know what you're doing with Alva. But Jun, Nico, Xana, just for getting better maps and getting good drops. Metamorphs have been very lucrative this league, so we'll have to see what the next league mechanic is. This build has been very good for Metamorph, except for the dying aspect, but once you start to understand that when you're fighting something like a scary Metamorph, all you want to do is attack it until all your minions are up, Flesh Offering, use your Fortify, and then just dash around killing all the rares, because when you kill the rares, you get the auras, the Metamorph's probably over there attacking your minions like a screen away, and you are happy. I was dying a lot to Metamorphs, and then I started changing my playstyle a little, and that was good. I think kind of that's about everything. We've talked about most of the different options. When we go into 3.10, I'll look a little bit more leveling once we get through the patch notes. I will likely be playing this build as a Necromancer, given that I'm not really a hardcore player. But if you do want to play this in hardcore, I definitely suggest One-Hander and Shield, and take Shield, Bastion of Hope, rather than Harmony of Purpose. And that will give you a little bit more defense. Hopefully next league is a little less rippy. We've died a couple times. We've died a couple times this league. But we've also killed the Awakener multiple times. We've also killed the Conquerors multiple times. And we've been playing... This is a good build to relax and chill out a bit. We've died significantly less since we've learned how to play the build a little more, and we've made some item upgrades. A 6-link is a very big one. Minions or enemies survive less long, Metamorphs survive less long, and so they kill you less. And then just getting a lot of life is helpful with that. But I'll put a... Oh! I know what I almost forgot. we're going to take a look at a path of building here for a very budget version of the build that also doesn't have leveled up gems, etc. Currently, on the live version of the build, our dominating blow is level 21, all these gems are 20 quality, level 20, and our dominating blow is about double this damage. If we drop all our gems to level 19, and say that we're a lot lower level, say we're level 86 or something, and you don't even need to be, again, this high of a level, because you can drop the life nodes and stuff, but if you drop these 3 nodes on the tree, you drop these life nodes on the tree, and you drop a few other nodes, you save about 12 points, which lets you get a much earlier level build. Again, you can drop these nodes even if you want to be just like level 80, which is, you know, this build clears maps pretty quickly. But you can hit kind of your main important nodes with a decent amount of percent increased life from the tree. We've got 200% increased life from the tree, even with, you know, 20 less points. Even if you drop the Scion life wheel, you're still at 150% increased life from the tree, and this gives you a 92 point skill tree, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, this is done with Brightbeak. We're not changing the gear around. You would only have about 4k life, but if you do switch to using Brightbeak and you drop all your gem levels by a bunch, you drop down to about 2 million damage. When you're in yellow maps or early red maps at level 80, 2 million damage per second is still pretty good. I really don't know what else to say about this build. The fact that you can hit such high peaks so early on in the game with such a little budget makes this build one of the favorites that I've ever run. I'm probably going to be starting 3.10 with this build, and we'll try a couple different variations. There are definitely other options you can go, but I mean, if you have any questions, leave them in the comment below. I will put a path of building for this sort of budget low-level version in the description, as well as for the final endgame build to kind of see what you might want to work towards. All of our currency has been made using this character. Let's switch that back. All of our currency has been made using this character. We've kind of hit the ceiling at this point. You know, we've spent a couple exalts buying rares, and to get upgrades, we'd have to be looking to spend multiple exalts on single pieces of gear, which as a budget build creator, that just doesn't work for me. So I just do your Alvas, do your Einhars, know what important beasts are. You can check PoE.ninja. I might go over a little bit more about currency in another video if there seems to be some interest for that. Get your Juns. Jun is a very important one, especially if you know what to do. I might include a link to a document that increases or that will help you increase your knowledge on how to make money off of these different masters. But aside from that, I mean, thank you guys for watching. I hope you give the build a try, and I hope to see you guys all in 3.10 playing Dominating Blow until they nerf this skill to the ground, because holy shit, this is busted.